Hi everyone, this is Startup Bright and we're here to talk all things startups related. This is the time and place where we talk with founders about their ideas, projects, goals and problems. With us today is Steve. He will be presenting his new idea how to move everything we have to a database instead of using file system. I met Paul, right, at Tech Day LA.
Tech Day LA.
Tech Day LA, and he was able to explain to me in very short period of time what you guys are doing. And me being myself a developer, it sounded something really interesting, a technology that may be applicable in many places. So the way we usually do this here is we give you 5 minutes, 6 minutes to pitch your company, officially pitch it.
Okay.
And after that, maybe go over a few questions asking you about your team, goals, marketing, and all that stuff. Startup related again.
Sure.
So yeah, go ahead, tell us about your company.
Okay, so AsterionDB is really just kind of the latest incarnation of what I've been doing for the past 26, 27 years. I've been a sole proprietor through the 90s and into the 2000s and forward. Back in the 90s, I made my living selling telecommunication software in the Oracle marketplace, interactive voice response ACD software. And in 2007, at the request of one of my customers, I revamped that software, and in the process I discovered a technique that essentially made the database, the Oracle database, smarter. And when you have a smarter database, it can do things that it doesn't normally do. And so that led to my discovering how to recognize and understand any type of multimedia format that I may want to store in the database. Now, I was already familiar with storing multimedia data because I was storing all the voice data for my IVR applications in the database, clear back into the early 90s. So I started storing high-def video in the database, and I wanted to watch the videos on a web page. And there were no streaming servers that would stream video out of a database onto a web page. So I wrote one.
You wrote a layer?
I wrote a streaming server, a purpose-built streaming server that just streams content from a database. So whether that content's a PDF, audio, images, a video, an archive file, I can stream that out of the database as opposed to...
I don't have to have a local copy of that asset.
This is true, but more significantly in terms of what AsterionDB is doing, that copy of that asset exists in the database. It does not exist in the file system where hackers and viruses can get at this content easily. So I had content in the database and I was streaming content out on the web page, and now the next problem is that people like to transcode their media from one format to another, big screen, small screen, high def, low def, and so forth. And that's where the big turn around the corner took place. I was just kind of pursuing things that seemed interesting from a technical point of view, and I really didn't have a grand vision at that point. But when I confronted the problem of transcoding the media from one format to another, I didn't want to export the video out of the database into a file in a directory, shove that through the transcoder, and then take the output, put that back in the database, and clean up all the artifacts. That was just crazy. So I wrote a file system gateway that essentially allows me to generate a file name for the input file, and generate a file name for the output file, and feed those file names to the transcoder, and the transcoder never knows that it's reading and writing to and from the database. And once I had that in place, I realized that I had all the keys to making a database, like the Oracle database, functional and a viable replacement for the traditional hierarchical file system. And so that allows me to move any user data file out of the directory and into the database. and then there are no more PDFs in your directories anymore. And so if a virus or a hacker gains access to your system and goes looking for PDFs to infect or steal, there are none in the databases. Or excuse me, in the directories. In the directories, that's right, they're in the database. And not only that, not only am I stopping the propagation of viruses and removing the roadmap that's used by hackers to exfiltrate information, but I'm also able to drive down the threshold between intrusion and detection, because many of the operations that these hackers and viruses and ransomware employ to discover information would be detected as a invalid operation, if you will, in my new paradigm. Mm-hmm. And so the net result is that I'm stopping the propagation of viruses, I'm increasing security immensely, making data more available and more interoperable, and I'm decreasing the threshold between intrusion and detection.
Okay.
And those are all really big and important things in terms of cybersecurity, data governance, compliance, auditing of assets, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So it has a lot of profound and deep implications throughout how we manage and work with our data. And so this technology has matured to the point where I can even take existing file-based programs and in many cases use them without change whatsoever in this new paradigm. And that's critical because people won't accept a new paradigm until you present enough benefits to make it worthwhile to put up with whatever effort and complexity is required to achieve the new goal. And so if I can take programs and use many of them without change right away, I'm halfway there.
Yeah, it's very hard to change people's behavior and habits. So shifting from using file system towards database-backed system would require a layer or a way to present it so that people use less brain cycles to become more accommodated to the new system.
Well, it's part of the challenge of paradigm change. Mm-hmm. And one of the dynamics of paradigm change, as I mentioned earlier, is that you have to present a solution that is so familiar in one sense, but yet so revelatory in terms of where you're going and what you're going to be able to do once you make the effort to make the change, that it's worthwhile to investigate this. And so it's actually a very fine thread, a very fine needle that you have to thread in order to present a paradigm change for this matter. And so if you look at the history of things, the file system was invented back in the 60s to manage 0.5 megabyte of data on a floppy. I don't have a floppy in my hand, but this is supposed to be a floppy. And if you had 2 floppies, you were the most important person in the company. And so that was an architecture where we, as people, had to organize how the information was stored on this floppy disk. And they took a paradigm that we were already familiar with, which was the file cabinet. You open the file cabinet and you got folders and files in the folders. And they said, look at the directory. You've got a folder here and a folder inside the folder and your files inside the folders. And people go, oh, I get it. The folder name is this, and then another folder name, and then a file name. And so it was a very easy transition from that paradigm, the file cabinet, to the file system. That's even why they kept some of the similar nomenclature. And so you've had all of this apparatus that's built up from the 1960s to take advantage of a paradigm that required you and I to organize how that information was stored on a floppy. And it's that same paradigm that's carried through to today. And back in the 60s and the 70s, software and computer systems and users themselves were not sophisticated enough to organize the data themselves. In other words, we didn't write programs that organized the data for us. We had to decide what directory that PDF went into. Now we can certainly write systems that organize the data for us. And we're already familiar with this to some degree because you go onto Facebook or Instagram and you look at a gallery of photos and you click on the photo that you want to view and you never see the file name. So we're already starting to move away from that paradigm, and people are already starting to become familiar with, oh, I'm just going to query for what I'm looking for, much like I look in Google. So if I take your file name, your directory paths, subdirectory, 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 file name dot extension, I can turn that into a unique set of keyword value pairs, client name, project, subproject, and so forth. And so then you could just search through your database for, show me all the files for this project, and I'm looking for this specific component, whatever. And you can narrow in, much like you narrow in on a gallery of search results, and click on the thing that you want to work on, and up it comes. So people are already starting to move to this new paradigm that I'm pushing the system architectures closer towards.
I guess my issue with such an approach would be the fact that search and database results are data sets. And when you talk about file system, everything is very determined. I know exactly where the file is. I don't have to make a statement that returns a set and eventually get that file in.
Well, no, that's not. There's ways to work within that modality. Because as I said, the directory path as ingested in terms of the original file presents a unique set of keyword value pairs that I can uniquely identify something by. Okay? The critical thing here is that we're moving away from the static nature of file names and the limited dimensionality that's presented by the hierarchical file system. So, for example, I'm working with a lawyer that needs to be able to relate documents with multiple clients or multiple witnesses, for example. And so instead of keeping 2 copies of the document in 2 separate subdirectories, we're able to tag that document with 2 separate client names, for example. And then it's searchable and accessible.
Yeah, I see the benefit because,
in
for example, when I save images on my hard drive, I want them, for example, to be saved under year, month, day, but at the same time, I want to be saved under vacation name, right? And the way I do this is I use symlinks. It's one file, but it shows like different in different locations. But essentially, I'm doing what you're saying, that I want to assign 2 different unique attributes to the same asset that I have.
That's right. So that you can search and find it.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, all these objects in the database get a unique object ID. So there is a mechanism to identify things uniquely by, an object ID. And that object ID is not really user-friendly and usable by you and I. But internally in the system, it's more than adequate for the system to go and find things. So there are aspects and things that you have to focus on in terms of the user interface that allow people to find their content quickly and easily and minimize all of that type of searching. Now remember, you don't necessarily always work with a singular atomic file name. You're frequently going to a directory level and then seeing a bunch of files within a directory. So I'm still replicating that basic modality in this new paradigm.
I see. So it is more like closer to hashtag. So I have an asset and I want to tag it. I want to associate different tags with it.
That's right. You're tagging it.
And then I can just search for specific tags and eventually get. That is interesting. So I have something like Google on my laptop.
That's right.
For my own assets and for my
That's right.
own files.
That's right. And I can also make that the content inside searchable.
Yeah.
That's a crucial thing because remember, I made the database smarter. So in terms of, normally, here's a trick question. What's unstructured data to a database? It's data that a database doesn't understand at an intrinsic level. So databases are good with working with things, with tables, rows and columns. And in discrete value types, character string, date, integer. Unstructured data is like, a big blob of, an image,
Yeah.
or voice data, or, video data. A database doesn't necessarily understand that format. It's been created by a specific codec, for example. So if you can somehow add the smarts to a database, so at the database's logical contextual level, it understands what this data is. Now it's no longer so unstructured. And so if I understand what the data is, if I add the smarts to the database, then it's much easier for me to make that data searchable. So I can search for and do things like pattern recognition against images in the database and do that work directly at the data layer. And so that means I can, and I'm talking geek speak here, but I can construct SQL statements that incorporate a where clause that includes essentially a function that says match this sample image against any of the people in this image feed and find me if this person shows up in this group photo.
Yeah.
And do that all through an SQL statement. That's currently basically, doable.
Are you only using this technology with Oracle backend, or it's applicable with different database engines?
Yeah,
I guess my question is it database agnostic, or it's strictly tied to Oracle?
Okay, so it requires a relational database, and it requires a relational database that has an advanced logical layer, meaning a programming language that's embedded and part of the database. Oracle has such a technology. Postgres does as well. The software and all the capabilities that I speak of were available and running under Postgres as of about 2 years ago, but I had to stop maintaining that version and focus on the Oracle environment. There's reasons why the Oracle database and the capabilities that it presents really argue for it to being the primary platform upon which you'll release this technology on. So that said, this technology would work with Oracle, Postgres, IBM DB2, and I believe Amazon's got their own relational database, Microsoft with SQL Server.
Okay. So you're not necessarily tied,
not tied to Oracle.
I see. Because I was going to say, if I'm a startup that is now interested in building upon your technology, Oracle is a little bit expensive.
I've got connections that get you free copies of the database that you can develop.
But in general term, Oracle is one of the expensive softwares. So
yeah, I'm not going to argue that fact. The thing that I'm going to say is that, and I know this from experience, if you're talking about asset protection and really important data, in terms of what AsterionDB can do in conjunction with the Oracle database, it's an unbeatable platform.
Okay.
And there's internal architectural reasons that make the Oracle database exceptional in terms of a platform for providing this type of paradigm shift.
Let's say that Oracle is the recommended platform to be used with AsterionDB.
It is. Now, if asset security is not the utmost important thing, but you like all of this interoperability, simplification of systems and so forth, Postgres is still a viable solution.
I see.
And it's just my experience with 34 years of working with these kinds of technologies that initially Postgres was not the preferable platform. Postgres was not going to get me into the 2- and 3-letter agencies the way Oracle will. Okay. With this technology.
I see.
And when you're marketing at 2- and 3-letter agencies in the government, that's high value, high impact content that requires the highest degree of security and asset protection.
Talking about security, I'm interested to understand how do you transfer the security context for a user from a file system into AsterionDB.
And that's fairly straightforward. So users log into the system and their content is basically tagged by user. And that gives us the ability to share content between registered users of the system, do other creative things like create a gallery where you can send a link to somebody, and when they access that link, it presents a gallery of all of the query return hits, for example.
Okay.
And so you can set up a gallery that shows all of the documents that pertain to a specific client and send that client that link. And they can view just those client documents for just that user of the AsterionDB system.
Okay. So I guess because Mike and I, we're technical people, I got more into technicality or technical details about Asterion. I will step back now and ask you a little bit more about your startup, about your company. So tell me a little bit more about your team.
So the team at the moment is highly technically centered. It's myself. I wrote all of this software, designed everything, authored the patents, and so forth. As I mentioned, I have 34 years of experience working with the Oracle database, 36 overall in the software industry. I'm uniquely positioned in terms of my skill sets and prior experience to write a product such as this. That being said, I brought on a friend of mine named Paul Lesniewski back in August of last year. Paul has a lot more experience running production systems on the net, and obviously I needed to bring somebody else on the team and get them up to speed with how this technology works and so forth. So Paul and I have managed to put together what I would consider a production-ready system, where we can support users and we can maybe take on maybe one or two new clients, you know, every month or so, that sort of thing. But that doesn't put us in a market-ready position. So to that end, I'm starting to add people that can help with marketing and sales activities, people that have connections with other Oracle users. I'm working on a partnership with an Oracle vendor that does master data management and data integration for Oracle customers. So I'm starting to establish some of these low initial early adopting customer relationships. That being said, in terms of my plan and what I expect to be doing, you know, I've got very unique skills. I shouldn't really be focusing too much on company building. I should be focusing more on software building. So I need to bring in and expand my team and to bring in people that are familiar with building a company such as this that has the potential to be a multi-billion-dollar platform company, selling enterprise-level software in multiple markets in a horizontal nature. And so, in my defense, I'd say that I've done things a little bit backwards. I went production ready, and now I'm looking to become market ready. I think a lot of startups become market ready before and if they ever become production ready.
Well, that depends on who is building it. I know a lot of startups that are started by engineers, and they very much do what you said. They build a product, and then they start looking for marketing approval and ways to approach different markets. So it's natural. You know, I did the same mistake maybe, just building a product and then started to look for ways to market it, and then market responded a little bit different than I expected. So it's always good to have marketing people on the same team that work together and hear their feedback and kind of continue developing the product in a way that market would accept it.
No, this is true. And one of my early adopting customers is a company called Gray Matter, located in Irvine. They provide software that manages all of the unstructured data that's created by movies and TV production companies as they ramp up. You know, signed documents, PDFs, you know, daily videos, set continuity photos, you name it. And so the principal involved at Gray Matter, Glenn Barber, has been participating in the design of this software now for about 2 years. And so Glenn is bringing both a marketing sense and a technical sense in terms of what he needs for his customers of his software. As Gray Matter provides software that manages all of the rights licensing for content, used, movies, TV shows, commercials. And so Glenn's looking at what AsterionDB can do in the context of what he needs for his iRights application, where iRights needs to be able to correlate this royalty information in the iRights system with the backing document where the artist has agreed to that royalty level, for example.
I see.
And so it's being able to link the structured data that iRights is keeping in its system with the unstructured data that it wants to refer to, and doing all of that in a organized and managed fashion.
So what is your marketing strategy? Because you said you want to build a platform company, right? You want to build a company that provides platform to enable pretty much everybody else to build their technologies using
That's right.
your...
So the Asterion Database Vault, which is Asterion's lead product, is based on underlying technology components. So in a sense, the Asterion Database Vault is kind of like a really nice baited hook. Somebody's going to take a look at the Asterion Database Vault and what it can do in terms of managing unstructured data and say, oh, well, I'd sure like that ability, but I want to deeply integrate that capability into my application set.
Okay.
And so we have underlying technology components where somebody can build something similar to the Asterion Database Vault, but more tightly integrate this capability into their application environment. Okay, so that's part of the basis in terms of being able to be a horizontal platform company. You have unique technology that can be applied across markets, and people can build things off of that unique technology that is distinct from anything else out there in the marketplace.
Yeah.
That's the angle that I'm coming from. In addition, I mentioned earlier that I made the database smarter when I had revamped that telecommunication software. What in essence I discovered how to do was control the telecommunications boards that talk on the phone directly from the database. And that was highly unusual. And what that meant is that I can move all of the application apparatus that would otherwise live in the middle tier, where we have the flexibility to interface to device drivers, and I can move all of that apparatus down to the data layer. And that presents a greatly simplified environment and architecture. So not only is this technology pushing out to securing all of our unstructured assets that live in the file system, but where this technology originally came from was discovering how to control discrete devices. And so I'm able to move entire application logic and apparatuses out of the middle tier and down to the data layer. That's another aspect of how AsterionDB can be a horizontal platform company. And in fact, I was at the Oracle Open World Convention. I just got back yesterday. And one of the most interesting contacts that I made was with individuals from Mitsubishi Electric. And they were demonstrating a robotic arm for use on the factory floor. And I talked to those gentlemen, and they were very interested in what I can do with securing the files that control how this robot arm is going to operate. I'm looking for partners that have a high degree of technical ability.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be in the best position to advocate for this technology.
Yeah, definitely. It is, for me, it's very interesting technology and paradigm shift from what we have currently everywhere to where we may move. Because it makes sense, as you said, people are now just going to Google or YouTube or any search engine and just they type tags. They're looking for specific things. And I would, for example, go with my image collection and say, show me all images where Steve was with me on vacation that day or that year.
That's right.
Makes more sense than going through that file system that is, 2018, June,
Right.
and so on.
And with limited ability to express more complex relationships.
Yeah, that's
Of
true.
the
Once
content.
once the file is there, it's there, and there is nothing else that I can do about that file. Just have the knowledge how to traverse down to that specific asset. When with this system, 2 months from now, I can say, oh, by the way, that asset can be associated with my new client, right? So I can add additional
another tag.
Or extend the meta information about
That's right.
that asset, so it makes it much more flexible and available.
That's right.
to
That's right. Now here's a trick question. What was the first unstructured database that was ever created and popularized?
I need your help there.
The file system.
Oh yeah,
It maintains a metadata layer of information so that you and I can identify the data
Yeah.
that's in the file system.
Yeah.
So you're already telling a hacker, half of the information they need to know about the information that's in your directories.
Yeah. So with the database, you definitely need to stand guard against stuff like SQL injection or backups, by the way. You have to make sure that backups are really good and also secure and so on. But that is something that I suppose
That's a known thing how to do.
Yeah. It's nothing
what this paradigm change provides is a way to move away from the ubiquity of the file system.
Mm-hmm.
So if you walked away from this desk and left your computer here, I could just go to the directories and scan through all your files.
Yeah.
Because I know how that computer works in terms of the file system.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have the ability to build application environments that define their own organizational structure. So I move away from a ubiquitous nature of this file system here that's universal across applications and give systems architects and developers the ability to design unique organizational methods for their data that's distinct and different from one system to the other. And so a hacker may be able to figure out one system over here, but that gives them no relevant understanding to another system somewhere else, unlike you would get with the file system on that computer right there, where everybody understands how it works.
Yeah, you can, just by looking at the folder structure, you can reverse engineer
all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
That's how Edward Snowden stole information. Any number of things.
Yeah. All right, so here I always ask founders if they can share with us some funny moments while you were building your company, funny, embarrassing, or ups and downs, whatever you want to share with us that is interesting.
Well, I like to tell everybody that I've eliminated the file system, and I'm very sorry it was an accident. I didn't intend to do that.
Okay.
I stumbled upon all of this stuff. As I mentioned, in 2007, I revamped my telecommunication software. And I kind of quickly came to the realization that I wasn't going to get anywhere marketing that. So I had to pivot, and I created a generalized tool that allowed me to make the database smarter.
Okay.
And that, as I mentioned earlier, that led to storing high-definition video in the database. That led to creating a streaming server. That led to creating a file system gateway. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wait a minute, that means I can eliminate the file system.
Yeah.
And I came to that realization in 2013, 2014. And I didn't necessarily choose the proper path initially to accomplish this. I twiddled around with a open source video editor and tried to integrate that into this environment, which I did, and that wasn't necessarily marketable, but it taught me a lot in terms of what it was going to take to integrate existing applications into this new paradigm. And it wasn't until 2016 that I pivoted towards writing a web application and a framework that actually does replace the file system. And there were certain, there was a certain confluence of events and technology maturation and market need that really started to come together in 2016 that's allowing me to be positioned now at 2018, 2019 with a mature product with a lot of features and capabilities that's able to explode into a marketplace area that desperately needs this capability but has no idea that this capability can even be presented. And I've done all of this with 4 programs and a half a megabyte of software. And that's just off the charts.
Yeah.
Nobody does something like that. I mean, if you told Larry Ellison that he could eliminate many of his competitive pressures that he realizes from Amazon, because nobody streams video from an Oracle database.
Yeah.
He can eliminate the pressure that he feels from Amazon S3, from NoSQL, from MongoDB, and so forth. With 4 programs and a half a megabyte of software, he'd probably go bananas. But the fact of the matter is you can't take a huge team of developers. They would never be able to produce this. This can really only come from somebody, that was in a position where I was, where I had the financial wherewithal, the technical chops. I had everything that I needed in order to do this. It just, I just had to somehow, navigate the waters and get myself into a position where I could take advantage of all of this confluence of events. One of the most critical being that Oracle is facing severe pressures, and they desperately need this technology, and they know that. So, once I get over this initial hurdle in terms of building out an initial team around me, getting that early adopting customers in place, use cases, and so forth, Oracle is, they've already told me that they want to take AsterionDB out to many of their, prime opportunities. And once this technology becomes recognized within Oracle's sales and marketing infrastructure as being key to them closing new business, not just existing customers, but landing new customers, and then it's off to the races, and Oracle is going to push this technology. Yeah. Because it means Oracle sells and Oracle wins contracts that they otherwise would have no business competing against.
So Steve, in terms of investment, I understand you're looking to extend your team, eventually get strategic partners as well. Are you looking for investment?
I am looking for investments, but I'm looking for, as much as I'm looking for investments that come with deep connections. Because if this is going to be a multi-billion-dollar horizontal platform company that's playing in these kind of marketplaces nationally and internationally, I'm going to need significant help and people that have been in this game already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what kind of discount you're going to offer to investors? Or that kind of question doesn't really make sense at this point?
I really haven't, haven't really gone through all of that fully. In terms of where AsterionDB is, we have technology that's hitting the marketplace presently. We have 2 patents. We've identified our key partners. We need to add a few people here and there in order to get things going at this initial phase and start to engage Oracle at a more strategic level. But I'm looking to grow this company as best as I can organically. So an initial investment of capital and connections that can bring the right kind of people, and AsterionDB is off and running. As I mentioned, this technology is enterprise-grade software.
Have you thought about going after companies that provide content distribution, for example, YouTube or
If I may have an inherently more efficient streaming architecture than what Amazon uses presently. And if that is true, if I'm 25% more efficient, for example, they're going to switch.
Well, that's a huge number.
Yeah, they're going to switch. And we just, at the moment, we don't know what that efficiency level is. But one of the strategic moves that I'm planning to make with Oracle, I've had an existing relationship with Oracle's director of media technology for a number of years. Mm-hmm. He's been very intrigued by what this technology can do, and just as importantly, the synergistic effect it can have in terms of where Oracle wants to go. Mm-hmm. And so I'm working with my ISV team at Oracle to develop a plan where we're going to approach Oracle's media division. Okay. And provide solutions for them so that they can manage their internal sales and training videos and so forth on their hardware, on their systems, and streamed out from their cloud platform. And what that allows us to do is, not only do I get an excellent, use case partner, and reference site, but it allows us to prove out each other's technology. Yeah. I'm presenting capabilities that the Oracle Cloud presently cannot exploit because there's no other vendor that presents this kind of capabilities. So if Oracle wants to be able to prove that they can stream high-def video out of their cloud platform just like Amazon does, I'm the one that has that technology that allows Oracle to do that. So Oracle proves their technology, and AsterionDB proves our technology in terms of its applicability in this market area. And so then what happens is I'm able to start to bring customers to Oracle Cloud because Oracle and AsterionDB is able to present a cohesive argument as to why, for example, one of the leading transcoding companies out there should use Oracle as their platform. Oracle's already using this company for transcoding purposes. I know a highly respected research analyst that's just been gaga over this technology. And so one of my plans is to leverage my relationship with the research analyst, my relationship with Oracle's director of media technology, to present a cohesive argument so that we can go after this leading transcoding platform, leading transcoding service provider, and bring them to Oracle's cloud platform. And once again, that's an example of how AsterionDB is enabling sales and market activities for Oracle that otherwise they would be locked out and precluded from. And once that starts to take traction, you have a huge organization that is hungry to reclaim lost market share and blunt the attacks that they face from MongoDB, NoSQL, Amazon, and so forth.
Okay.
And that's, it's actually quite intimidating to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge task
to
bring a company to that stage. But hopefully, I like the strategy that you just described, using people that you know in your network and actually go and present to your biggest potential client the use case, how they can actually benefit from your technology, and that will give you probably the best way to get in that big company and convince them that, hey, this is something new, this is something good, this is something that you can build upon and create great things.
Everybody that I talk to at Oracle that has enough technical ability to understand what this technology could do definitely gets that.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like to end on a high note, and probably we will meet again in 6 or 3 months. I don't know, 6 months, just to see where you're going, how you have developed with your company.
That's good.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure, and I'm honored to talk to you.
It was my pleasure and my honor, Nick.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks. Yeah.